My name's Beverly Gray, and I'm the director here at the David Nickens Heritage Center.
When did it start coming to you that, hey, we've got heritage we need to be able to look back on?
Well, many years, actually, I've thought that we've needed something, some tangible place where we could learn our history. But it actually started when working with one of the professors at Ohio University, Chillicothe. I used to go up there every now and again and speak about black women in the 19th century. And I knew we had this house here that we weren't using at the time. And so I said to the lady that was the professor there, wouldn't it be nice if we had a room in that house where we could showcase, let's say, black women in the 19th century? And she said, oh yeah, I think that would be great. So we took the idea to the pastor of the church at that time. And he actually had a minor in history and has always had an eye for legacy. And he said, well, just write your proposal and let's just see what you'd like to have, which we did. And the board decided that maybe we could just have the whole house. And so that was 4 exhibits ago, and now we're just overflowing.
Much of your research history has been on the Underground Railroad. How much of that is in this house?
One of our complete exhibits is on the Underground Railroad. We try to tell the story as best we can in one room. And then, of course, it shows up in the other exhibits because people that are involved in those exhibits were also involved in the Underground Railroad. For instance, Sojourner Truth was involved in the Underground Railroad as an orator. And so she shows up in the room for the women. And upstairs where we're talking about the churches were also instrumental in the Underground Railroad. So you see that theme carried through in all 3 exhibits.
The importance of a center like this for today's youth.
You know, I really believe that so many difficulties that our youth of today comes from the fact they don't really know who they are. They sometimes have no identity in terms of where they came from. They may have some familial information, but in terms of where they come from as a people, ethnically, a lot of times they have no idea. And if you could just take a minute to see, for instance, in the women's room, we just have 30 biographies, and that's because we didn't have any more room for anybody else, that show people who came straight out of slavery. This would be women, of course, that came straight out of slavery, having sometimes no education, having very little education. All they had is a talent that oftentimes they were given by God, and they took that talent and they made great things from it. That inspires me, and I'm an old person, and I see what you can do no matter who you are. And the reason I say as an old person I'm inspired is there's one woman who in her 90s was still walking on the picket line in Washington, D.C., so they wouldn't have to sit in the back of the buses and one thing in Washington, D.C. And I thought, well, if she can do it, I guess I can hobble around here and still do a few things. But I think our kids need to hear this story. They need to see the leg irons that our forefathers had to wear when they were in those slave coffles, when they were being taken to the auction block. And I think they need to see those inventories where people of color are listed right along with the cows and the pigs and the horses. And I think they need to see the places that were really used on the Underground Railroad, and they need to see what was the forerunner of the KKK. We're hearing about the KKK today. It didn't just start. It has been around for a long time. And not only has it been around for a long time, the theories that the KKK espouses has been around for a long time, and we have some of those things here. Kids need to see that. They need to understand how real it really is. We've been told by others that have come here from other places in the state. For instance, we've hosted various conventions and that kind of thing. And they tell us that there's nothing like this in the state of Ohio that tells this kind of story. So we look at that as being that we are providing information that people can get other places. We do have now quite a few documents that gives us the records of churches and places like that. And when people are doing their family history, sometimes these kinds of records are very important in trying to find out family history. So we're really proud of that aspect of our building also.
You have a very unique document you recently received.
We have a letter signed by Dr. Martin Luther King, and it was sent to one of the members of our church. The date is October of 1958. And it was right after he was stabbed in September of that year by a crazed woman in New York. And he responded to the lady, her name was Nina Lowe, and it is signed with his signature. It's a typewritten letter, but it's signed with his signature, which we were able to verify. So we think that's an important, Dr. Martin Luther King, some people don't think that that's very long ago, but the letter was written in 1958, so that will tell you how long ago that was. So that's pretty precious.
60 years.
Absolutely. Some of you weren't even born by then, were you?
And you got stuff in here older than that?
Oh, we do. We have a lot of things. One of the things that we have in our showcase in the Underground Railroad room has to do with the importation of slaves on the cargo ships. And it was right before the last slave ships came in, because as you know, the importation of slaves was abolished in 1807. And it has in it where they're advertising a cargo of Negroes for sale. And it's one of the last ships that came into that harbor to sell people of color. And it has that advertisement in that paper. And it also says that there were a few people that had not paid their bill for those that they had already purchased. And he put the slave trader put a notice in the paper that he wanted his money from these people who had not paid him. So this paper, and it is an authentic paper. It's not a replica. It's a real newspaper from that town of that era. So we think that that's pretty interesting too. And then we also have one of the propaganda newspapers written by Lundy, who was at one time in Mount Pleasant, Ohio, but he had one of the first propaganda newspapers, and it was called The Genius of Universal Freedom, and it has a date of 1828 on it, and it is an original.
So you are open year-round by appointment?
We are open by appointment at this particular time. They can make that appointment by calling me at 740-775-7866. And we'll try our best to accommodate you. We get everything from families of maybe 3 or 4 to groups of people. So we try to accommodate whatever the particular need is.